This is definitely our best conference yet. And I want to thank everybody that was there. And one thing that this year's conference really demonstrated is that Americans are ready and eager to come together to drive unprecedented reforms and the 28th Amendment straight to victory. We're not waiting for politicians or anyone else to get the job done for us. We're stepping up as active citizens in a participatory democracy to make these changes happen. In the past few months, we've added the 20th state, New Hampshire, to the column after it formally called on Congress to pass a constitutional amendment to put people, not money, in charge of our political system. We also earned record support and secured the first cross-partisan introduction of the amendment in Congress. We secured pledges to support and advance the amendment from nearly every single major candidate for presidential election from both parties. And we're helped moving the ballot initiative forward in Alaska and followed our Big Citizens Initiative win in Massachusetts last year by implementing a first-in-the-nation Citizens Commission to advance this amendment. All of these incredible victories are possible because we are united in vision, not party. The American Promise citizen leaders are leading the way. And tonight's call, we are joined by American Promise's co-founder and president, Jeff Clements, who will give us a recap on our incredible conference, some exciting updates, and what's a look ahead for American Promise in 2020 and beyond. Now, before I turn it over to Jeff, I want to start with this quote from the late great leader and civil rights activist, Elijah Cummings, who passed away tragically just last month. He said, "When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, what did we do to make sure our democracy was intact?" And I'm going to repeat that. When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, what did we do to make sure our democracy was intact? And I love that quote because it reminds us that in a healthy democracy, it's up to us, the people, to uphold our democracy. We are the gatekeepers of justice, human liberty, and equal citizenship. And as we work towards this historic amendment, we know that we do not simply stand on the sidelines and watch our democracy crumble, but we are actively participating in its rebuilding. And I'm so honored to be in this work with you all, and I'm sure Representative Cummings, who is up there with the angels now, would also agree. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Clements. And after he speaks, I'm going to let you all know how to request a question and answer so that you can request a meeting, and I'll let you know how to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, well, boy. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Speak up just a bit.
Okay. If you can't hear me, just say so, and I'll speak up even louder. But hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this call. And that was a great quote from Congressman Cummings, and certainly at American Promise, we live that all the time of asking what can we do. And if you're on this call, if you were at our conference, if you are doing work in your community, we're answering the call. So thank you so much. I want to just cover a few things fairly quickly, and then open it up to your questions and have a conversation and get your suggestions and your feedback if you were at the conference, your questions if you weren't, and some ideas for 2020 as we start to look at how we're going to scale this up even bigger to reach millions of Americans and start bringing this constitutional amendment and historic reform over the finish line. Let me start with the conference, the National Citizen Leadership Conference. It was our third one, and we had some goals. We wanted to make sure we united and empowered our movement in the amendment work, but also the wider reform effort as well. As we said at the conference, a lot of us, both on this call and our membership and our organization itself, weren't involved in this work even 5 years ago, and that's true of so many reforms, and that gives me a lot of hope. And we're all working on the same cause, and that, of course, is American self-government and our equal rights as citizens. So The amendment is, as you know, I think one of the most important foundations, but all of that work is great, and it was so good to have many of our partners at the conference. The other thing about uniting and empowering us, though, of course, is all of us in American Promise, and we come from so many different areas of the country, so many different demographic backgrounds, so many different political backgrounds, and if you were there, I'm sure you felt like I did, just really gratified, especially in these times, to see 300 American Promise members from almost every state, Maine to Florida, Alabama to Alaska, coming together to really work hard together, work through some sharing of best practices, inspiration, ideas, and strategies. And so that was really powerful. And we had more young people than ever before. Our partnership with Bridge USA, the cause of our time that came out of that, where we have young Americans from communities across the country going back to carry our message and cause and ask us to make sure we're empowering this rising generation, and if nothing else, getting out of their way, because they came to play and they're ready to go. So that was really exciting, and we wanted to make sure we really took actionable tools. It was a lot of inspiration, amazing things like the Doris Kearns Goodwin and Joe Goodwin conversation, or the speeches from Congressman Jamie Raskin and our own New Hampshire State Senator Jim Rubens from across the aisle. But we wanted that inspiration. We wanted those words of leadership, but we also wanted to make sure we were sharing the best practices, good tools for real action, and we certainly got that. The biggest example of that was at our Citizen Lobby Day, but before I leave the program, and let me just tell you, our amazing Melissa Goff just loaded up on our YouTube channel a whole bunch of videos. So whether you were at the conference or whether you couldn't make it, you'll want to check out their videos. They're segmented by different speakers right now. We'll have more to come, but there's a sneak preview up there. Go to our YouTube channel, American Promise. If you haven't subscribed yet to it, just click the subscribe button so you can both support more people seeing the videos, but also knowing when more get loaded up. They're really good tools. They're good in your American Promise Association. They're good to share. So check that out on the American Promise YouTube channel. Citizen Lobby Day. We left the conference Sunday afternoon, as you know, if you were there, with a real call to action, inspiring calls to action from all over. Alan LaPolice in Kansas, going back to organized veterans, Rod Morrison in Wyoming, going back to organized farmers and other sectors of Wyoming, and Devin Height, who you'll hear from soon, going back to University of Oklahoma to carry the American Promise message to her peers at the university there. So really inspiring, and it kicked us off to go up to Capitol Hill on the Monday after Lobby Day, and it's the Monday after the conference, and we had 124 meetings across Capitol Hill, Republicans, Democrats, constituents meeting directly with their members of Congress. The training we received was outstanding, and we got some really good feedback and I think made significant progress. As you know, New Hampshire just became the 20th state calling for this 28th Amendment, so we delivered the New Hampshire resolution and had excellent conversations with the New Hampshire delegation. But I know I sat in and joined several of the meetings, and I want to say something about that because I think most of us know right now virtually every Democrat in Congress is in support of our work for a constitutional amendment. Independents like Angus King, Bernie Sanders are in support, and it's big support. Jim McGovern, Congressman, he's the chair of the Rules Committee. That's a powerful job, and he hosted our Lobby Day. He provided a room for us to meet. Congressman Dean Phillips, a former businessman who in the ice cream business, actually came down and joined Ben Cohen, our own ice cream man from Ben & Jerry's, and they scooped ice cream together. So, that was really fun, but we know our challenge, and American Promise members take on big challenges. Our challenge isn't to convince Democrats is to get 290 votes in the House, 67 in the Senate. And that means we need to leverage our great cross-partisan network, our cross-partisan organization, our cross-partisan tools, and get Republicans on board. And we went in asking them, naturally in the politics of today, it's hard to say go sign on to that amendment bill with 200 Democrats. Instead, we want them to sign on to the idea that the amendment is going to do, and then if they have language they like better, introduce that and start that moving, and then we'll bring them together. So I was in meetings with Senator Susan Collins. I was in an amazing meeting with Congressman Jack Bergman, and I hope my friends from Northern Michigan are on the call. And we saw, and I'm sure you did if you were in some of those, these were real conversations with interested lawmakers once they saw that we were a cross-partisan group as well. So we'll hear more about that, and Boy is going to help kick this a bit of training off on this call. But I'm actually in Washington now, following up on Capitol Hill with some of our meetings. But it won't be me. It'll be us, and we all know how constituents open the doors, and the work you do in your American Promise associations and in the states is what's going to get our numbers on board to get this amendment out of Congress soon. How are we going to accelerate it? Let's look ahead to 2020 just quickly, and then I would love to hear your questions. Well, Boy, do you want to just say how people can raise their hand now, and then maybe some folks will be ready when I finish up? And then I'll keep going. How do people ask a question?
Yeah, that works. I can tell people just to get the questions queued up. So if you would like to ask a question, just press the number 1 on your keypad, and then once it's time for question and answer, I will call on you, and I will unmute you so that you can ask your question and everybody can hear.
Great, and I'll wrap up. Thanks, Boy. I'll wrap up in just a minute, but just press 1 on your keyboard if you have a question. I want to share what we're thinking for 2020. It's a really pivotal year for our movement, for American Promise. It's a big election year, of course, but we're on a game plan to pass and ratify this amendment. We're 3 years in, and 2020 and 2022 were always the pivotal year. So we're going to be making some big investments, and our work has caught notice. We are on the map. People want to support us. They want to build this. What you're doing is people know it's not the easiest thing to do in a political environment like we have. And I think we're going to have some great opportunities to really scale this up. So we're going to invest hard in communications and digital strategies. That's going to bring our message to millions more Americans. It's going to give you more digital tools, more members, more scope in where you live, and give us more numbers to leverage when we're meeting with our lawmakers. That getting that message out is really important, and we've got a great, wonderful volunteer communications task force of experts and experienced professionals in marketing and communications working on that. We're hiring, and I shared with you in an email before the call. If you didn't get it, let me know. I'll share it again. We're hiring a director of citizen empowerment, and that is a real validation of what Boy and Azer and Kimberly and Rosie and all of you have done. We want to bring more leadership, more support for that work, and more experience to scale it out even more and integrate it with some of the network work we do, like our rising generation and the cause of our time, veterans, farmers, Business for American Promise. All those are forms of citizen empowerment, and we think by integrating them better and bringing them closer to your APAs and in your states, we'll be able to have a whole bunch of impact. And so we'll have a director of citizen empowerment. If you know of candidates or people who might be interested in that, share the job description. We'll be hiring more citizen empowerment coordinators as well once the director's on board, and doing train the trainer programs and other things to help all of us in this work. So finally, we're going to be bringing on a Congress manager. All of you get here on lobby day and when you can. I'm here today, but we really need to get in the face, frankly, of Congress and keep the pressure on. And so we're going to be bringing on a Congress manager and really make sure that the work we all do across the country is heard on Capitol Hill, and we're able to leverage that more efficiently for support in Congress itself. So there's a lot more to come. Your ideas are welcome, your feedback, your suggestions, whether about the conference, whether about going forward now. But let me turn it back to Aboy. You can push one on your keypad for a question. And before I turn it back to Aboy, let me just say I'm not sure if this will be her last call. There may be another one, but as I said in my email, she's moving to New York. We're sad to see Aboy go. She's a superstar. We're sure she'll be in the New York APA, the American Promise Association there, and at our next conference, and no doubt we'll be lobbying her when she's in Congress before long. So, Aboy, thanks so much for all you do, and let me turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. And for the record, I'd already signed on to the amendment as soon as I got elected, so you wouldn't even have to lobby me.
Oh, good.
Okay, so I'm going to open up the floor to some questions. Laura Nittmeyer, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what's your question? Can you hear me?
I don't think we can hear you, Laura. Oh, there you are.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to press 1. I apologize.
Well,
it's okay.
It's nice to hear you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Joe Geldof, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what's your question?
Joe Geldof, Juneau, Alaska. On Friday, I'll be up in Anchorage and working with a former Republican senator who was president of the Alaska Senate. Do you have a 750 or 850, around that range, editorial column, because I'll be ghosting this out for somebody, but do you have something that worked in a Republican state, largely Republican state, by a Republican, aimed at a Republican audience up here? If you could send me that, that would help when I ghost out columns that will be appearing in places like the Anchorage Daily News. That's it from Juneau.
Yeah, all right, Joe. Well, thank you so much. And Joe came all the way from Alaska to be at the conference. I was in a meeting with him on Capitol Hill with Congressman Don Young's office, the Dean of the Congress from Alaska. And Joe is just a terrific American Promise member and great friend. So thank you, Joe. We do have something I think you'll like. Again, Jim Rubin's a Republican, former state senator in New Hampshire, conservative. You might have heard him speak at the conference. New Hampshire, Republicans respect him. He has op-eds that he's done to help New Hampshire become the 20th state to call for the amendment. And Ann Drum and Nancy Heselton have been kind of working with his messaging around some talking points and pieces. So we will follow up and send that to you. And boy, would you just help make sure I do that and get that to Joe.
Absolutely. Okay. Next person, Sally Johnson. You are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what is your question?
Well, I'm Sally Johnson from Minnesota, and I'm wondering if there will be a Citizen Leadership Conference next year, and if it could be earlier with the election coming up.
Yeah, great question, Sally. We're weighing that now. So your feedback and suggestion that it be earlier, given the election, is something we've certainly got on our minds as well. There will be some form of Citizen Leadership Conference, and we think it's important. It brings us together. It inspires us. It helps us grow and have more impact. We do need to show up on Capitol Hill to make sure we're heard. But you're right, the autumn of 2020 is going to be all about the election. I do want to use that opportunity to do a plug for our pledge campaign, an election year. Make sure we're getting out to ask every candidate for any office to sign our American Promise Pledge, as 13 of the presidential candidates have done. But that's what that will be about. So we will take that into account when scheduling and we'll keep you posted on all the opportunities to convene together in 2020 that we hope to have, and any citizen lobby day that we schedule. But we'll be mindful of that election calendar for sure.
Next question. MJ Madonna, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from and what's your question?
Did I press something? I didn't have any questions, and I'm from New Jersey.
Thank you. That's all right. No worries. John, Jack, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from and what is your question?
Okay, this is Jack Wyatt. I'm in Ann Arbor. Hi, Jeff. Long time friend.
Yeah, hi, Jack.
My interest has to do with this year being the 10th year. Well, this year, 2020 being the 10th year of Citizens United. I'd like to do something just to call people to awareness that it's been 10 years and that we want to do something to remind people and to encourage people to get involved. We're thinking of a couple things. One thing we're thinking about is a lobby day in Michigan. So my question would be, hey, you had some material that you used for your lobby day in Washington. I'd like to see that so that we might use that in Michigan. And then the other thing is are anybody or is anyone else or any other groups thinking about trying to do something around the 10th anniversary of Citizens United, and what is it that you're doing?
Great. Thanks, Jack. Good to hear from you. It has been a while, and thanks for the work you're doing. There was discussion at the conference about that, recognizing the 10th anniversary. I think some folks are doing that. The Maryland, Get Money Out Maryland folks are certainly eager to get that going. We haven't yet decided on what would be, and would be happy to hear your ideas and suggestions, including a lobby day. That's a neat idea. So how we can be best supportive. What we want to do is, as always, make sure that we're using the opportunities to educate, empower, and activate and win support. And to the extent a 10th anniversary of the Citizens United case helps that, we certainly want to take advantage of that. I think there's the question we're weighing is what's the best way to do that. There's a lot of our positive work is looking forward to the kind of democracy we're building rather than backwards, and a lot of it is about the amendment and reform and the equal rights of all people, and making sure we're securing our republic against the domination of big money in our political system. The Citizens United case was obviously, for many of us, we're well aware of the relationship of that and the harm that case did, but 90% of Americans are with us on the problem and ready for a solution, regardless of whether they know about the Citizens United case. So we're just weighing all those factors, and we'll certainly be doing something, but we don't yet have a sort of model recommendation. But feel free to share your ideas and what you're doing. I'm not trying to discourage that. I'm just raising the different things we're thinking about as we weigh, how much and to what's the most impactful thing we can do. So do let us know what you think and what you would like in terms of support from us. We're certainly happy to share the lobby day materials and work with you to customize those to Michigan, Jack.
Great. Conrad, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what is your question?
Well, I'm calling in from Ann Arbor, and I think Jack, coincidentally, we didn't talk about it before, but asked my question. We'll be having a board meeting and another monthly meeting to discuss ideas that we came up with our last board meeting, and we'll refine them and let you know what we've thought. In the meantime, we would welcome, accept, and appreciate any materials you have to send us in support of that. For instance, any specific data that supports the Jeff, your statement, and we tell everybody that 75% of Republicans, 80-something%. Any data you have that's quite credible in support of those assertions would be very useful to us. Thank you in advance.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. Well, Boyd, do you have the polling material that you could send out to the Ann Arbor folks? The most recent one was 2018, University of Maryland Voices of the People study, very, very credible. Something like 80% support, 66% Republican support, 88 or something like that. I'm going by memory. But that particular poll would be a good one to share.
And the follow-up email that I'll send out tomorrow after this call, I'll include all of the documents that we included in our lobby day meetings for all of those that weren't able to attend, and that does include that polling specifically. So yes, absolutely.
Right.
That's a great suggestion. Next question comes from Ted Kanapke. You are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what's your question?
Thank you. Calling from Columbus, Ohio. I think I'm following up a little bit on Jeff's comment, especially the fact that we need to continue moving ahead on a bipartisan basis. Having said that, he did underline how difficult it's been to get support in Congress from Republicans. I wonder, given the fact there are a number of Senate races coming up, does it make sense, or has there been discussion about feeling out the candidates, Democrat and Republican, in these races? I'm thinking particularly of the one in Kentucky, the person who's holding up SJR 51. That seems to be the bottleneck right now, at least one of the main ones. Has there been any discussion of not necessarily campaigning or favoring one candidate, but just raising the issue? Where do you stand on campaign finance? It's been passed, as I think everybody here knows, the House Bill number 2, and now it's waiting for action in the Senate. Right now it seems to be that the President of the Senate is preventing anybody in the party from giving their response. Is there a way we can start to ask that question and get those candidates to respond to it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ted. Thanks so much. I don't think it's a secret, and we are all about cross-partisan. We have cross-partisan staff, board, organization, membership, everything. But I will say bluntly that the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, is not persuadable on this, I don't think. And so that our strategy does not depend on convincing him. But we do think that our strategy does need to do exactly what you're saying, Ted, and that's why we have the candidate pledge. We want Republicans to take the pledge. We want Democrats to take the pledge. We want independents to take the pledge. And we don't want anyone to run for office for any seat, let alone the Senate, the U.S. Senate, and not be asked where they stand on this, because I think most voters would be interested in that information and would vote, take that into account when they decide how they're going to vote. In Maine, we do think Susan Collins is much more interested in this effort than Mitch McConnell. She was a sponsor of the McCain-Feingold law. She has expressed her disappointment and criticism of the court in the Citizens United case. She ran for office on two things, small business and money in politics. And so she is going to be in a very hot and expensive Senate race, and as usual will be nonpartisan and cross-partisan. But we would, as we announced at the conference, like to see Stand With Maine and all the Mainers across the political spectrum expressing their cross-partisan support for the amendment and their wish that whoever goes to Washington in that Senate seat supports the amendment. So we hope to make that an issue, just as you're suggesting, and we would really urge all of you and everybody to download the pledge. It's on our website if you don't have it already, and boy, maybe we can include that link as well in the follow-up, and absolutely bring it to the voters and the candidates' attention between now and 2020.
Add that into the list of things that we can include. That's a great thing to add. Next question, and we have about 3 minutes or so left of questions. Ishwari, you're unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what's your question?
Hi there. I'm calling in from Santa Fe. It's not exactly a question, it's a suggestion for the person who asked about if you would send the data, about Americans supporting this work across the board. Our Common Cause New Mexico did a public opinion survey that has really, really relevant questions and super relevant data that is categorized by region of the state. And so it really is relevant to specific people wanting to know what their constituents think. And when I asked Vicki Harrison, I think she's from Common Cause National, if other states had similar public opinion surveys, she said that she thought they did. So anyone who's wanting relevant data in your state, I think it would be worth checking the Common Cause in your state and see if they have a public opinion survey. You might find some really good information that would be compelling to specific politicians, elected officials.
That's great, Ishwari. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Barbara Chase, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what's your question?
Hi, I'm calling in from Wyoming. I don't have a question. I have a comment in reference to the gentleman's request for editorials in support of the American Promise efforts. And there was a great editorial in the newspaper in Casper, Wyoming in 2017 from Alan Simpson, who is a member of the Advisory Council of American Promise. He was a distinguished Republican senator from Wyoming for 18 years, and he is a very strong advocate of the 28th Amendment. And I could provide a copy of that. It's not in the form it was in the newspaper, but I have a copy of his editorial that was very powerful. It's what got me aware of of this effort, and I've been a strong volunteer ever since.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that reminder. I remember that piece well, and Senator Simpson has been a real giant for us across the country, and I know in Wyoming too. We're really happy to have him on the Advisory Council, and it's a great reminder, and we'll make sure that Joe Geldof in Alaska, who asked for that, gets both Jim Rubin's piece and Al Simpson's as well. So thank you. Great idea.
Excellent. Unfortunately, we're all out of time for questions, but if you do have any more questions, please feel free to email me at wambuig@americanpromise.net, and I will be sure to answer it, or if I can't answer it, I will definitely plug somebody on our team that can answer the question. Jeff, do you have any closing thoughts before we pass it over?
No, I want to hurry and hear what Devin has to say. So thank you, everybody. Really good to hear your suggestions. Keep them coming, and thanks for everything.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for those updates, and for all of you that asked those really awesome questions. Tonight's call has been a little bit different, but we're still going to keep one thing on schedule, which is our grassroots victory, which is personally my favorite part of the call. And this month we're hearing from Devin Hyatt, who is an International Studies and Journalism senior at the University of Oklahoma and one of our NCLC Student Scholarship recipients. Devin is not only committed a weekend during the school year to come to the conference, but she also stayed in D.C. on Monday to attend Lobby Day. And before the conference, she scheduled meetings with congressional offices from Oklahoma and her home state of Texas, including an incredible meeting with Representative Republican Will Hurd himself. And now Devin is going to be talking to us about her experiences at the conference and those meetings. So, Devin, thank you for joining. You are off mute. Go take it over.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. So I was just going to talk a little about the 3 meetings that I had during Lobby Day and then what we've been working on in Oklahoma since I got back. So Lobby Day was my first ever experience formally meeting with a representative and asking them for direct action on an issue. So I was pretty nervous going into my first meeting in Congressman Hurd's office. And I spent a lot of time beforehand kind of writing a detailed outline of everything I planned to say because I didn't want to leave out any important information about American Promise and the different things we were asking for. But I think in doing that, I made myself more nervous than I needed to be because I kind of prepared as if I was going to give, a formal presentation in front of like a classroom full of people. But really it was much more casual than I expected, and you're really just engaging in kind of an active conversation with this person. And I was lucky that in the first meeting I was in Congressman Hurd's office, Jim Rubens was also there. And it was really helpful to see how he conducted himself because I think he really excels in making a single point and then kind of asking the person a follow-up question, which helps ensure that they're actively engaged throughout the conversation rather than just kind of passively listening to you on autopilot. And so I kind of took notes from Jim, and during my next meeting with Congressman Tom Cole's office, who is a Republican in Oklahoma, I just tried to relax and ask open-ended questions with his legislative aide, specifically about things we have in common, which I think really helped her open up. And I kind of looked her up on LinkedIn first so that I would have a better idea of who I was meeting with and things we might have in common. So in this case, she happened to have just graduated from the college that I currently attend. So I kind of said, hey, I don't feel like a lot of my peers at OU are civically engaged and excited about participating in the political system. Did you ever feel like that? And, what factors do you think stop people our age from wanting to get involved? And do you think it's the fact that young people don't always have the financial means to feel like they have an actual voice in our democracy? And I think when you kind of open up this dialogue about things you have in common and ask them questions about their opinions, as you could see her eyes just really light up, and she was like, yeah, actually, I have felt like that. And so I think that was really helpful, and by the end of the meeting, I felt like I had established a professional connection with this girl and that I could come talk to her in the future about anything American Promise is working on, and I sent her a follow-up email recently, and she replied today with a really nice, long email saying, she's going to talk to Congressman Cole this week and let me know what he says about signing the candidate pledge and everything. So I felt like that was really helpful. And then by my third and final meeting was with Senator Cornyn's office, who's one of the senators in Texas. And so I was in that meeting with Ann Drum, and we kind of opened up that meeting by saying, so what issues do you think are the most important to Senator Cornyn? And you could see that she wasn't really expecting that. She was expecting to just kind of take notes and nod along. So when you open up the meeting by asking them their opinions, it gave me a much better idea of where we stood as well, because the first thing she said was, well, the senator cares a lot about climate change. And then she stopped and corrected herself and said, I'm so sorry, I meant to say environmental and energy issues. So right away I was like, okay, this is an office where, she's not really allowed to even acknowledge the term climate change. So I knew immediately from the get-go that I needed to kind of hammer down on these Republican talking points that Jim Rubens had helped me with. And I know a few people asked questions during this call about, marketing the message to Republicans. So I do think if there's any way that Jim Rubens could make kind of an informational video on how to do that, it would be really helpful, because that was something I was really nervous about too, going into the day with 3 meetings with Republican legislators, and he helped me exponentially. So I think before the next Lobby Day, that could be an awesome thing to have. And then I left Lobby Day and this whole conference just feeling so empowered and fired up to go back home and to keep this momentum going after you meet these people from around the country that have the same passions as you and the same engagement. You feel so empowered, and you feel like you're not alone in this, and that you actually have the ability to make a change. And so currently what we're working on in Oklahoma is I'm kind of teaming up with one of my journalism professors, whose name is Dr. Robert Kerr, and he's been researching and writing academically about Citizens United and democratic reform for over 25 years. and we both know a few different members of the Norman City Council. So we've been reaching out to city council members about scheduling a meeting for next month where we can propose a city council resolution in favor of the 28th Amendment. And I think that that would be the best way somewhere like Oklahoma to kind of get this issue off the ground. And then we've also been talking with Ann Drum, who's been helping us with the first stages of starting a chapter in Oklahoma and garnering interest in our cause here, and finding kind of a core team of people in the Norman and Oklahoma City area to help get this chapter started. And then also I wrote an article, which I just recently finished, where I interviewed Azer and Ann Drum and Jim Rubens. And so I'm hoping to get that published in the Fulcrum soon. And while I'm doing that, Dr. Kerr is writing an op-ed for the Norman Transcript, which is our local paper. So we have some things that we're hoping to get published, and then hopefully by the next national conference call, the Norman area will have an American Promise Association chapter up and running.
Awesome, Devin. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of the things that you're doing. And like I said to all of you, Devin is one of the recipients of our Rising Generation Scholarship Fund that we put aside specifically to empower this next generation of American leaders in this movement, to get them involved in this. And it's so great to see that this experience has really caused some really big breakthroughs. And I fully intend to see Oklahoma become one of the next states to call on this amendment because of you and all of the work that you're doing. So thank you so much. It's been such an honor and pleasure to get to know you.
Of course, thank you. This was an amazing experience. I'm so glad to have met everyone at American Promise and be involved with this cause and with your organization now.
Okay. Well, as we all know, in 2018, our APAs had 93 media pieces published. And so far in 2019, we've had 96 media pieces published. We'll talk about our month's action in a second, but I have a feeling that on our next call, we're going to be at 100, which is so exciting. Last year, APAs had 137 meetings with elected officials at this point in the year. And this year, so far, we've already had 205 meetings with elected officials or staff. And our yearly goal is 200. So we've already surpassed that, and that's something to be very proud of. So thank you all so much for continuing to do this work and to meet these incredible goals. Over 120 of those meetings actually took place on Lobby Day, which is really cool as well. And that's the most amount of meetings we've ever had on Lobby Day thus far. We marched together to celebrate New Hampshire becoming the 20th state. To support the amendment, we saw legislators co-sponsor legislation literally directly after our meetings. And now, for this month's action, we're going to make sure that the rest of the country hears about our incredible progress. So our action this month is all about writing letters to the editor, highlighting NCLC and Lobby Day, and encouraging our fellow Americans to get involved in their communities to advance this amendment. You all received the action sheet in an email this morning, but it's also in the APA resource library, and you can find that on the American Promise website. Right at the top, just click on resources, and you'll see it right in that folder. Is there anybody on the call that has already had a letter to the editor published about Lobby Day and the conference that wants to share any tips or tricks? And I'm asking that already knowing that there is somebody on this call that has gotten their letter to the editor published specifically about Lobby Day. So if you are that person, which I know you are, could you please press the number 1 on your keypad so that I could unmute you and you can share your wonderful tips with everybody. Ah, there she is. Sandy, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what are your tips? Oh, 1 second. I think you're still on mute. Amy? Now, Sandy, can you hear me? Okay. Well, we will move on. Carol, did you get a letter to the editor published about Lobby Day or NCLC? Okay, looks like folks are not able to answer. That's all right. Laura, did you have a letter to the editor published about the conference?
Are you talking to me, Laura Myers?
Did you mean to press number 1?
Oh, sorry. I didn't. I had pressed 1 during the questions, but concerning the question you have about getting coverage for meetings with your members of Congress, which is what Lobby Day is all about. Actually, 2 years ago, it was very easy just by having a personal relationship with the editor of my little local paper to get a whole article published, not just about the fact that we had met with our member of Congress, but also about American Promise in general and the whole cause and the progress up to that point. And that's the kind of article that I would like to see published for our new group in California. So it's the number one thing to do is, I know it's on the action sheet, and not this month's action sheet, but in general on the APA achievements, something about getting an article published about your group. The best possible thing to do is call up an editor that you know and say, hey, I had a meeting with my Republican member of Congress, and they'll be very interested in writing all about you.
That's a great tip. Thank you so much, Laura. The person that I was hoping would answer, and I guess there was some technical difficulties, was Sandy Clements from Florida. She had an incredible letter to the editor published, or op-ed rather, about Lobby Day, and was just so positive and uplifting around how people of all backgrounds came together for the conference and to meet with their elected officials around the 28th Amendment. And I will include that in the follow-up email for all of you to see. It also was included in our Promising Stories in our newsletter last week, in case you missed it, but that's a great example. So we're going to finish up the call with our training section that's going to focus on effective follow-up for meetings with elected officials. Many of you participated in Lobby Day, so this should be really relevant. So some effective follow-up has a couple main components. One is to thank them for the meeting. If you made any personal connections during the meeting, remind them of this nicely at the start of your email, because remember, we're trying to build that relationship. You could either do this via email, which is a great way to do it quickly, especially a day or two after the meeting. What's also really nice is to even send a handwritten note with everybody that attended the meeting signing it. That's also a really great way to begin to foster that relationship. The second thing is to circle back on your primary and secondary asks. So this is your main reasoning for the follow-up, so you have to be sure to lay out those asks very clearly. You may want to say, if you're writing to a Republican member of Congress, I'm writing primarily to circle back on the statement of principle we left with your office. Do you have any feedback? Additionally, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the model of the 28th Amendment language that we left to your office, and please provide us with any feedback. And again, this provides the office with tangible next steps to do. What's really cool about all of these elected officials is that they have staff of 5 to up to 30 people for some of these elected officials, all focused on giving these representatives the best advice possible around all of these different pieces of legislation that are in front of them. So when you give these folks specific things to follow up on, that lets them know exactly how they should be advising their bosses essentially on this piece of legislation. So when you're asking to circle back specifically on the language, that lets them know, hey, let me give this to our head of Judiciary Legal Counsel. And from my experience working for an elected official, that's really the best way to make sure they're going to get a response. from the office and to continue to build that relationship. The third thing is to follow up specific to Lobby Day, is to make sure that you CC Jeff Clements, that's Jeff, JEFFC at AmericanPromise.net on these emails as well. He is our interim congressional manager before we hire one like Jeff mentioned earlier. So if there are any really great developments that have come out of your meetings, particularly with Republican legislators, please CC Jeff or Azer Cole at AmericanPromise.net. Either of those people will be able to provide any more insight or connect with these elected officials in district if that's needed. So please do that if you've gotten some great feedback from elected officials. Lastly, the question you should always be thinking about is, when is my next meeting with this elected official? So the final piece of your follow-up should also be about asking for a final meeting down the road. And as we're coming up on December recess and moving into the holiday season, elected officials are increasingly going to be coming back to district and staying in district. So that would be a really great opportunity to do a follow-up meeting in district, bring even more people with you, bring some young people with you as well. This would be a really great opportunity to follow up and to continue to bring and to strengthen that relationship. And for all of you that participated in Lobby Day, this information was emailed to you last week, but I will send it again tomorrow. Does anybody have any questions on follow-up, or do you have any advice about anything? If you do, please press the number 1 on your keypad, and I will unmute you so you can share. Like we're all set on that. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody.
But boy, I see some ones, actually. Do you see that? Looks like Marie and Mark Rivera.
See anybody with their hands up? Oh,
no.
There they are. They're popping up. Okay. Sharon, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what's your comment? Hi.
I am. I'm calling in from Delaware, and I happen to be also a member of the League of Women Voters. And I just wanted to point out to people that the League, especially our National League of Women Voters, has made money in politics a very high priority issue right now, and it is stated in their www.com League of Women Voters that anybody can get to. Men are very, very welcome into this league, I would like to add. And in some cases, I believe that this could offer people some clout that maybe they hadn't thought of before if they mention to some of these people that the League of Women Voters is out to get them. I think could really help.
Great idea, Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing that. John Boyer, my computer would allow me. Okay, give me one moment. You are unmuted. Where are you calling
hi.
In? What's your comment?
Yeah, this is John Boyer in Northern Virginia. Our APA is in Northern Virginia. Well, last Sunday I went to the screening of this wonderful new film. It's called Unrepresented. And there's a short clip of you, Jeff, in the film. And then there was an interesting discussion afterwards. And I just wanted to say people should keep an eye out for this film. It's going to air on PBS. But I talked to the executive producer. They're making an effort to try to make copies available to people, to have it online, to use as an educational backgrounder on money and politics. It's really excellent. Have you seen it, Jeff? I don't know. But I wanted to mention that we're working with Hedrick Smith on having a screening of his new documentary that's coming up on Frontline in January on the people versus the politicians, his latest work at George Mason University. And we're working with the students to have them also then do a screening of Unrepresent Us. And we're hoping to attract not just students, but others to these screenings to get discussions going. And in the follow-up discussion at the film, the main focus was on getting people to do things, take action. And what can we do? And here in Virginia, we're focusing on city resolutions and writing letters to the editor. These are things you can always do, right? And we're just focusing on that right now. The issue is so complex, and it's covered well in this film. But I think the idea of pulling people in little by little and getting them involved in something active where they meet again and again, get letters published, pass resolutions or begin discussing with cities, about resolutions. That's a great way to get an APA going in an individual city. That's the path we're pursuing. That's just my comment.
Thank you so much, John. That's actually a great idea, especially around the screening at colleges. I know lots of colleges will have funding for that, so that's a great way to get young people involved and hopefully in greater actions later on. We have time for just a few more comments. Marie, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what's your comment?
Hi, I'm calling from Tri-County, New Jersey, APA, and my comment is back to follow up on meetings with the members at Lobby Day, and that is that we had 5 meetings, all with Democratic members, staff, and we asked each one of them to please have their lawmaker consider who across the aisle they might be able to speak to about the Republican Statement of Principle. And I didn't have them with me because we didn't include them they weren't included in the Democratic Lobby Day, but I forwarded those along with the follow-up emails after each one of the meetings. So, my plan is to do an additional follow-up contact. And is that, should I copy, Jeff or Azer, so that if there's a question, that they have about, gee, so-and-so's office said they might be interested in more information or more follow-up, but I would not be a constituent of that office. Is that something that we should include Jeff's email or Azer's email for that contact?
Marie, I'd say yes.
Jeff,
thank you. That would be great.
Great.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. We have time for just one more question, if my computer will allow me to unmute. John Stonin, you are unmuted. Where are you calling in from, and what is your question?
Oh my gosh, this is John Stonin up here in Juneau, Alaska. Bookend to Joe, I guess. I wanted to report on some of the actions I've taken up here in the last session. I had one of our Republican state representatives interested in moving something on the 28th Amendment, but the poor guy passed away. I'm sure that we can work some other ones here in the upcoming session. It starts in January. But on the federal level, I think we're going to have a difficult time. Joe, I guess it sounded like you visited Don Young in D.C., and I'd be interested in finding out what he had to say. Because
Sorry, we don't have enough time to have a full question about that right now. But please do email me at wambuig@americanpromise.net to continue that conversation. Sorry to cut you off short. Just in the interest of time, I just want to make sure that we respect everyone's time and end the call right at 9 o'clock. So thank you, everybody, so much for participating.